Continuing here in chapter 15, talking more about our toddlers, preschool age, and then moving into our adolescents and our teens. Moving on to toddlers and preschool children. So that growth rate is going to start tapering off, and so appetite's going to start decreasing. And this is a time whenever parents start getting a little concerned about picky eaters and just that lower appetite, but that's normal. Our nutrient concerns are kind of similar. Again, the calories become less of an issue though, because again, they should start tapering off. They shouldn't be eating as much. But as far as nutrients, so iron and calcium need to be plentiful, and then keeping an eye on sodium to keep it low. So with our iron deficiencies, of course, that can lead to anemia. It's likely to appear after essentially breast milk or formula starts decreasing. Again, that's whenever those iron stores start running out. So decreased stamina, so lack of energy, lower learning starts to occur. That sluggishness can indicate some type of anemia and not enough oxygen's not getting to those tissues for energy. So again, looking for those iron deficiencies is important. Again, a lot of bone growth is still occurring during this time, so calcium is vital to maximizing the bone mass that then helps later in life to decrease osteoporosis. So dairy until up to 2 years, that should be whole milk. That extra fat is still needed for those calories for growth and development as well as for energy. And again, if there's a dairy allergy or more of a vegan diet, non-dairy sources can also supply enough calcium, like soy milk or orange juice can provide those. But again, ensuring that calcium is maximized during these years as well. And then sodium, though, starts to become an issue as more foods get introduced. Again, as we mentioned before, excessive sodium is very prevalent in our diets and in our foods, canned vegetables for preserving things, as well as just adding them for taste. So again, just being sure to limit the salt during cooking and decreasing the use of those processed foods to decrease that excessive sodium. Again, picky eating starts coming into play here. Usually, whenever foods are getting introduced, a much more, they're more accepting of different foods. But then as toddlers drive to eat isn't as intense. Again, they don't need as many calories. That growth rate is slowing down. They're more interested in playing. They're also become wary of new things. Their taste buds are much more sensitive than ours. So things that are seem mild to us are kind of very strong to them. It can take 10 or more exposures of a food for them to find it acceptable. So just keep trying and trying to introduce different foods because those taste buds are changing. And again, just overcoming all these other obstacles. So just a few tips for improving that. Pairing a new food with something familiar. They kind of mix them in a way together. Enlist the child in the selection, help them prepare help them in preparing the foods or picking out what to have, coming up with fun finger foods that they'll enjoy eating. And then also save the best foods for last, so serve more of the challenging, newer foods earlier when they're really hungry and more likely to kind of, rough through it and just get through the taste if they don't love it because they're hungry. Looking here at snacking, this is whenever these habits start to develop. So they have a much smaller capacity. So it's better for this age range to have 6 smaller meals instead of 3 larger meals like adults typically have. So snacking kind of in between these meals is good, especially if they're nutritious. So crunchy foods tend to be more acceptable. So raw veggies, add some hummus in there for protein and just a variety of foods. Again, don't overreact. If they don't love it, let it go. Try it again. Not creating a stressful situation over it. If you overreact, that's just a way of getting attention. That creates some negative feedback there. Again, kids are never going to starve themselves. So if they don't eat, if you offer them a snack and they don't eat it, they're going to eat when they get hungry. But again, offering nutrient-dense options instead of sugary foods. But again, lots of nutrients packed in whatever they do actually eat is very important. Also, a few things to be watchful for during this time. Lead poisoning. This is commonly one that the pediatricians will ask about. This comes up in contaminated drinking water, lead dust, especially if lead paint, if you're in an older home, that can be an issue, and some dietary supplements. Kids, as long as they are eating healthy and eating, they are getting what they need. Dietary supplements really are not typically needed unless there's an iron deficiency or something to that effect. So again, not adding supplements unless they're really needed. The effects of lead poisoning are long-term intellectual and behavioral impairments. So one way to help protect, especially with the water, is if you're using cold water, let it run for a couple minutes if it's been a while. If you just turned it on, this isn't needed, but if it's been a while since it's been running, let it run for a couple minutes to kind of flush that out before then using that water for this age range. Just a little bit here about potential dietary patterns for younger children. So while they certainly can be introduced, just a few extra things to pay attention to, a special attention to the iron from not having as much meat or protein in the diet, B12, same thing, as well as vitamin D, as well as a potential inadequate intake of calories. So making sure that enough calories are being obtained and that these two vitamins and minerals is being paid attention to. So again, just including those nutrient dense sources, being sure to include protein, calcium, vitamin D, and that B12. Promoting good oral health is good during this development too. Of course, the teeth are coming in. They have those baby teeth, kind of our practice teeth while they're getting ready for the real ones. So beginning oral hygiene as soon as those teeth start to appear in the first few months. Early dental care, some nutritional related tips here. Fluorinated water, so water with fluorine in it after the 6 months. Moderate, soft and sugary options. Small amounts of those toothpaste with fluorides in them twice a day, so they can get too much fluoride, so just paying attention to that. Snacks in moderation, and then make good choices whenever they're snacking, so good crunchy fruits and vegetables, not sugary soft foods that can get stuck in their teeth. And if they're chewing gum, making sure it's sugarless. Now going into school age children, moving up and closer to our teens. So by this point, those dietary patterns need improvement. This is where, again, even though we have a lot of good health care, we're seeing some bad things happening, some bad stats, especially in kids. So this is where it's important to set up those healthy eating habits. So places of concern, so increasing our fruits and vegetables, whole grains, not the refined, and then decreasing those sugary drinks. So again, this is really where to pay attention with diets for school age children. Again, for the most part, fruits are the worst. Most of them are lower targets, as well as the vegetables too. So the goals just get harder to achieve as the children get older. So there's more peer pressure, it's more likely that they're eating fast food, that they're eating chips with their friends, health messages on social media, and just more desire to be independent and kind of do what they want to do. So all of that makes it really hard to keep these concerns more at the forefront and get them to take them serious. Just kind of what the MyPlate looks like over a few of the ages here. So again, age 2, the calories are going to be less just because they're small. So per pound, though, there's still a good bit of calories going on in there. So again, those fruits, they're all the same. I mean, we need our carbs, we need our proteins, we need our fruits and veggies. So half the plate, no matter what, is going to be those fruits and vegetables. It's just, again, the amount of calories that are needed are less in children. So whenever you're preparing a kid's plate, you don't need to pack it like you would your own. They shouldn't be consuming that much. They need calories, but not excessive amounts. So again, just kind of looking at portions is really all that's changing as we get older. So just larger portions of those fruits and vegetables, adding in those larger amounts of protein, but keeping the milk the same. So again, just using those low-fat options for yolk, skim milk. Again, just introducing these foods, paying attention though to proportions is really what we're focusing on. All right, and that leads us in then to overweight and obesity. So since the 70s, this has just more than tripled. So again, we have healthcare, but this issue is becoming more alarming pretty much every day. So more than about a third of US school kids are classified as being overweight or obese. And that just leads to an onset of health decay throughout their life. So the sooner that we can kind of get a grip on this, the better it'll be for everybody. So about 40% of obese children and about 80% of obese adolescents, a little bit older, become obese adults. So it's really hard to reverse that. So causes, role models. So we see it very often, obese parents having obese children. Again, just paying attention to the cues that they're learning from their parents or caretakers. Dietary patterns, again, more processed food, more fast food, inactivity. Again, physical activity decreasing as screen time increases. So again, this is definitely an area we need improvement. And one of the main side effects of obesity is the type 2 diabetes that's increasing in our youth. So typically type 2 doesn't develop until older age, but this is alarmingly increasing. About 85% of those that are overweight get diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, and it's mainly due to that decreased physical activity. Other risk factors besides the obesity and the sedentary lifestyle, close relatives that have the disease, and being in a non-white population, so some of the genetic factors. So if individuals are overweight, they are screened for type 2 diabetes every couple years. So what are some things we can do to improve these eating habits to decrease this obesity? So breakfast is actually one that's really important. So starting the day with breakfast actually reduces the risk of obesity. Those fortified cereals have lots of iron and nutrients in them to help with development. Having the carb with the protein helps increase energy and that satiety, staying fuller longer. Healthy fats, so limiting those saturated fats, again, non-dairy after the age of 2. Adding fish in to get those nice omega-3 fatty acids. Beverages are really important. This is an easy place to add in those extra calories. Again, just sodas, fruit juices, just all the added sugar needs to be replaced with water or lower fat-free milk. Again, replacing the 100% juice with whole fruits instead. All right, now moving into our teenage years, the nutrition concerns here is one, who thinks about their health as a teenager? Not very many. So just a lack of interest. Growth spurts are happening at this time. So again, that growth rate is starting to kind of pick back up, not like it was that first year, but it is increasing. So ages typically 10 to 13 for girls, 12 to 15, so a little later for boys. As far as muscle and fat changes, so girls are gaining fat, unfortunately, but also increasing that lean tissue. Boys increasing that lean tissue as well, so more muscle that's developing. So they have an increased appetite and calorie intake. So going back to that upswing. So again, those first couple years, really high calories, starts to wean off as that growth kind of tapers off, and then we get another spurt here during these ages. So these nutritional recommendations, so reducing solid fat and those added sugars. So again, nutrient-dense foods, limiting saturated fats and trans fats, increasing those veggies and fruits as well as dairy and whole grains, being very active, increasing our calcium and vitamin D to help with that bone health, iron-rich foods. So again, watching for anemia as we've seen in the other ages. Decreasing fast food, this is a big problem here, as well as caffeine intake. This is, with more energy drinks available, this is becoming a larger concern. So excessive amounts of caffeine have impacts on the neurological and cardiovascular development that alter sleep patterns that ultimately affect our growth and learning. So again, unfortunately, again, a lot of popularity with the energy drinks, leading into peer pressure, and again, then not sleeping, and just the cycle continues. So again, the impact of fast food and caffeine drinks is definitely taking a toll. Now moving into some food allergies. So some different terms. Just a food allergy means there's an immune reaction to food. It's also called a food hypersensitivity. Now this is different than a food intolerance. So with a food intolerance, there's a reaction to food, but it does not involve an allergic reaction. So it's not activating the immune system. But it still causes, some GI distress like nausea, bloating, gas, but it's not due to an allergic reaction. Now, coming back to our allergies, though, the term antigen is anything that induces a state of sensitivity or activates part of the immune system. So essentially anything that would create antibodies. So this includes bacteria and fungi. There are lots of different things. If we're talking about an antigen that is food related, we call it an allergen. So this is a foreign protein that's some type of antigen, but it induces excessive production of an immune response. So it creates an allergic reaction. So it activates those antibodies. But again, this can be food, but it could also be things like poison ivy, dust. They're also allergens. Just kind of to put these two terms together, all allergens are antigens, but not all antigens are allergens. So again, allergens and antigens can't necessarily be used interchangeably. But again, if we're talking about something that creates an allergic reaction, we call it an allergen. Again, it can be food, it could be something in the environment. But there are other things as well, just more generally called antigens, that trigger those responses as well. One of the biggest things to worry about with an allergic reaction is what's called anaphylaxis. This is a severe allergic response. This is where the blood pressure drops really low, the respiratory distress, so hard to breathe, and ultimately can be fatal. So if we focus here on our food allergies, some of the symptoms, so with the skin, of course, we think about like a bee sting or something like that. So itchy, tingling, some redness, hives, and swelling are common, especially with food. GI tract issues, so things like nausea and vomiting, gas, bloating, some constipation or indigestion, which can be caused by multiple things, but it includes an allergy to food. With the respiratory tract, again, kind of a typical allergic reaction: runny nose, wheezing, not being able to breathe very well. And then with the heart and the cardiovascular system, so that blood pressure dropping, the heart rate increasing. So all of these that have this star beside them, these could potentially be related to that fatal anaphylaxis, so need immediate medical attention. All right, so what are some of the causes? So one is introducing foods before the age of 4. Again, 6 months is what's recommended. So again, what happens here is that the infant has kind of a leaky GI, so that lets some of the proteins get into the bloodstream, and then the antibodies start reacting to them, thinking it's a foreign material because it shouldn't be there. It should be in the gut. There's also what's referred to as the hygiene hypothesis, and this is where we now, especially after COVID, even more so, have a germophobic society, so where lots of hand sanitizers are being used. So essentially what that does is it causes our immune system not to be challenged, which actually increases allergic reactions whenever things are introduced. So slowly developing, so, getting dirty, even having a little, ingesting a little bit of dirt whenever you're playing, that actually helps train our immune system. So this hygiene hypothesis indicates that staying too clean, being too germophobic, can actually cause more allergic reactions and be detrimental more than helpful. So again, it just makes us more sensitive to things that are not harmful, those innocuous substances. Now looking at these, and we've mentioned these before, but coming back to this, there are 8 food allergens that are mandatory food labels. They have to be reported if they're in the foods. The most common, peanut allergies, followed then by milk, shellfish like shrimp, different tree nuts like pine nuts, walnuts, eggs, fin fish, wheat, and then soy. So all of these are the 8 most common. They make up the majority of food allergens. So again, they do have to be identified on all labels. And then finally, just some substances that cause intolerances. So again, this doesn't activate the immune response, but it does cause some GI distress. So different parts of some foods like red wine, tomatoes, and pineapples, they're very acidic, so that a lot of people can kind of get heartburn or upset stomachs just due to the acidity of those. Again, it's not an allergic reaction. Synthetic compounds in foods, especially MSG, a lot of time that will cause especially diarrhea in many people. Different food coloring agents are insensitive or are intolerable. Different contaminants, so like antibiotics, chemicals like pesticides, and then crops or insect parts that can be part of our foods. They can cause GI distress. In our food safety, we talked about the Clostridium botulinum, the bacteria in a lot of canned foods that can release toxins that then cause a GI response. And then also enzyme deficiencies like lactase make individuals intolerable to lactose. So in addition to some of the food allergies, we have also some that just cause GI distress like diarrhea, nausea, and vomiting, but don't actually activate that immune response.